Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another season, man. Already, can you guys believe it? Another season, season 4, the story of. I am proud to announce this story is dedicated to the story of my girl Maegan joining us today. As you guys know, watching from home, I have with me my co-host. Now, they say God doesn't make mistakes, but he is living proof he was a mistake. But don't you worry. As you can see, I have a headband on in case he gets out of line. I'll kick his ass. The one, the only, the ugly, Michael Bowie.
You know, such a long intro, Manny. I'm happy for you to be here. I didn't know that Mr. Wonka would let you out of the chocolate factory on this early to be here, but I'm happy that he was kind enough to let you go early. I know that you work long shifts there at the factory. But here we are today, the story of Maegan Tietz. We are about to jump into it. Maegan, welcome to the show here on the story of. How are you doing today?
Doing really good, guys. I'm so happy to be with you.
That's awesome. Now, we are inside of Season 4. This is a new episode. This is a new season. This is a new story. So we want to jump into the first episode talking about you. Tell us, where did you come from? Where were you born? Who raised you growing up? How was life as a child?
Okay, well, let me start by thanking you very much, Mr. Willy Wonka of the after-school programs ever in a million years. You are the Willy Wonka of it, I promise. So when I was a kid, I grew up in Taylor, Michigan. Born in Trenton, the hospital over there, South Shore. And lived in Taylor my whole life on West Point, way over there at Van Born Telegraph, right where they got the big blue bridge. So right there was always like good trails. We were always fishing. We were riding four-wheelers. We grew up like getting off the bus from school and our dad's having the truck started, ready to go with boats hooked up every day.
We grew up. I assume that's more siblings. So you're not an only child. How many brothers and sisters did you have? Who raised you?
Okay, so when I was younger, before I had kids, I had 3 younger brothers and sisters. So they're a couple years younger, 10 years younger, 13 years younger. So to me, they were my babies for sure. I was always the oldest. I'm a Cancer. So I took care of everybody's kids on the whole block. And all my dad's friends would come and pay me every day and drop the kids off.
You grew up in a closed
for money. But
you grew up in a closed community?
Yeah, we had 5 streets.
And you were cool with everybody on the block, so to speak?
Yeah, and if you go over like Van Born this way, you're in Dearborn Heights, Dearborn, which is different from Taylor, and then downriver is this way. Okay. So Taylor always stayed kind of it's a big city, but it's a tight-knit community, like huge tight-knit. So those 5 streets, I mean, all the kids on the block that used to ride our bikes all day and stop at the stop signs and play that, green and red game. And we had fun and we were safe and it was cool. And then the lights came on and we all had to go in,
Okay, yeah.
And you said your dad raised you. Your mom wasn't there, or was she there?
No. My dad provided. Always the provider, because, he came from old school family. But I feel like our parents, my parents, I am 38 years old. So, we're thinking they're born in 62, 64. They were taught to be the hush-hush generation. Like, just be quiet and just do what you're doing. My parents were really like rock stars. Honest to God. They were like rock stars for life. I feel like they really felt like that. That's just how it was. Taylor was a place where you had to leave or you never leave type place. You get stuck in that little cycle of bullshit,
You said he was the provider. What did he do? Like, what job did he have to provide for you and all these kids?
My most favorite, he's a tool and die guy. So he cut CNC. He's a CNC tool and die guy with EDM, CNC, where you cut steel and you cut metal. And you either do it through water, electricity, tools, whatever it is. But he worked for Roush Racing. And he used to build on Mark Martin's race cars, like make parts, cut them.
Now,
it was so sweet. It was the best.
Who's Mark Martin? Like, for people like me, I don't really know who that is. So tell the people, who's Mark Martin?
Mark Martin is a special man. He was from down south, and he raced against Earnhardt. He was his biggest competitor ever in his whole lifetime. And Earnhardt Sr., before Earnhardt passed. So then Mark Martin went on to race his son for many, many years. And he kind of bowed out of the industry once Earnhardt was gone. It wasn't the same no more. But Martin was a good dude. And he would come to Michigan Speedway out here in Brooklyn, and he would win every time. And I just thought it was for me. So I've been raised at the track since I was 2 years old. We did the racetracks, we did fishing, and we did rock and roll. We did garage parties. I just saw my parents really just not ever grow out of that hush-hush generation. So when me and my brothers came up, when I was raising them, I always told them to break that cycle, you know. Just break it, because all our parents' friends said, you guys are such good, you guys are good kids. Your parents are so jacked up.
Okay.
I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I mean, it seems like, and you mentioned a little bit about it, you know, growing up in Taylor is that cycle of, I mean, you said it, bullshit, right? Just a lot of crap.
Going to the wolves.
Right, right. So did you ever experience, you know, the bullshit of growing up in Taylor? No? No? Yes? No?
Yeah, I'm a fighter, so, you know, I'm a fighter. Okay. So when I said my parents thought they were rock stars for life, it started like parties in the garage, and we just got like the cordless phones. So like people that would call for dad, you know, you go knock on the door, dad just opens the door, he's got a deer hanging, you know, like it's so disgusting. And all his friends partying, and now that I'm older, I know what they were doing. They were doing drugs like, you know, like cocaine, maybe even went farther than that to where they were smoking things, and that's not good for nobody. Thank God they broke that now that they're older and they're grandparents and stuff. You know, I have to say, they've grown through it finally, but at the time you thought you'd never grow out of it. So just seeing the partying, seeing the drugs, seeing the things, getting the worst advice in the world from any woman or man that walked through my life. My grandma was right around the corner, and she was a German woman. And when she was 15, she went through the Nazis' time. And she went back to the mountains to rescue my great-grandma, my great-great, so it'd be her grandma. Okay. So what she had to do was go from downtown in Germany, where my grandpa was in a concentration camp for not fighting for Hitler. So that was her father. She said, Dad, well, you're in jail, so I'm going to go get Grandma out in the mountains. Well, no one tells the story about America sending the Russians through these borders and how they raped and pillaged every single country. Country man, country woman, country child. They're raping and pillaging every single person in the country in Germany. So through the mountains of the Sound of Music, that movie, my grandma used to play in those mountains when she was a little girl. That's where they raped and pillaged all the children. Like little girls were raped by the whole army of the Russians. And they were kids that got cut off from communications. Yeah. They had no clue what was going on. They felt like everything in the world was a threat, and they were scared. And it wasn't even of the right people.
So let me.
That's what I feel like we're dipping into.
Let me jump in there for a second, just to talk about, because this is not just your grandmother. I also want to talk about your mother and your grandmother, because these are the women that were in your life. So was your mom a stay-at-home mom? With your how did your mom contribute to like being in your life? Was she a stay-at-home mom? How did she raise you? And then how was that different from your grandmother, who also was inside your life, and how she was a part of it?
So for what my grandma went through, she thought that we should always appreciate just one night of not starving, one night of not being hungry. Like it was so good, because back then when they were kids, they were hungry for 3 nights before they even got a meal. So when I was a little girl, she'd say that she'd drive down the road and just worry about whether I was eating, whether I was being watched. She never thought I'd get past the age of 3 without something bad happening to me. Because my mom and dad just threw me to the wolves, and I mean, God bless their souls. They had to learn and go through it. I've had to learn and go through it, you know, eventually. In life, we all do. But do we? Kids are so important. Let me just put it that way. My grandma knew that.
What about your mom?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
My mom was raised, okay, so my mom's parents, she's from England. She's a very little English cookie. She's so sweet, my Nana.
Your
and
mom
my
is
papa
from
was
England?
in the army. Yeah, my mom's mom.
Okay.
Was over in England. She grew up there. And my papa is Cherokee Indian from Kentucky Cherokee. We have that lineage. So he went into the army and went over to England, met my Nana, her knight in shining armor, and came back and had 5 kids. So my mom's the oldest of 5 kids also. So we come from big families. Every woman in my family all the way back in England are 19, we had kids, 19, we had kids, 19, we had kids, and it was all girls. Like, so that was what I was set up for, to be traditionally raised, like, yeah, old school. You stay at home, your man's a warrior, he's a fighter, he's awesome, he's the provider. Even when he screws up, we all go, shh, sweep it under the bush. And then when she screws up, we say, shh, sweep it under the bush. And the kids will eventually grow and learn, right?
The question I want to know is what kind of kid you are growing up. Were you a good kid? Were you a bad kid? Were you somebody that got in trouble a lot? And how were were there punishments that followed you? I mean, your dad was always at work because he was the provider, so your mom kind of had to deal with a lot of the stuff with all of the kids inside the household. So what kind of kid were you, and what kind of kid were your brothers and sisters, especially looking at the fact that you said that you had to raise some of them, or help raise some of them?
So the older people in my family say that I would switch sides as I went from family to different, my father to his mother and my grandma to my other grandma and things like that. But I think they only saw what they saw because I soaked up every little piece of everything that they taught me, whether it was good or bad. I soaked it up and I got tired of hearing what I was going to be, and I decided to be what I want to be. And then later on down the road, God took me in his path. But to be a fighter when you're a child, how do you know your path? How do you know God's will on your life? How do you learn that? But from our grandmothers, just being good women, not all of them, God forbid, but most grandmothers still have that motherly natural instinct. So I was taught that very young. So with the kids, like my little brothers and sisters, I thought they'd hate me because I had to leave them when I was older. And I'm like, oh, dang, I feel like I'm leaving you guys behind. But I wasn't, because they came back around and said they remembered every song I played for them back in high school when I was in high school. They remembered a lot of advice I gave them. They remember me praying with them at night before they went to bed. They remember these things. I remember my little brother trying to breastfeed Barney because we were trying to teach him about like, so cute. He's like 30 now. So they all love and respect me, and they've all been taken care of, and they're good.
Manny, you said you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, Maegan. I mean, just from it's a lot to take in, but it seems almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, that spirituality and God were a big part of you growing up as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was taught the physical part of the religious part, that part. I was taught the physical part at first because that's all you hear verbally. Like, you have to experience this more spiritually than just emotional and physical. So at first I learned the emotional and physical part of religion, Christianity, where I was going as far as my God and the creator of the universe. And it was instilled very young. I think I've been prayed for since the day I was born.
Is there a certain religion that you belong to?
I grew up from the age of 12 to 14 as a Jehovah's Witness kid.
Okay, and what was that life like growing up?
So my grandma that came over from Germany, she met the witnesses back in the 70s or early 80s, I think late 70s. She was a very, very big business entrepreneur. My grandma, she sold Shaklee. Shaklee is a multivitamin that was the first multivitamin ever sold in the United States of America. He was friends with Edison and Ford and everybody. Dr. Shaklee was. So she was into health nutrition. She always said there's things up in the mountain, Maegan, where they're dancing on in that movie, Sound of Music. She said there's plants we'll never know of that used to cure many things. They've just been stomped on, you know, and ignored. So she was more nutrition and God. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses found her, hooked my grandma into that religion, and she was an angel in this whole circumstance, or organization, I should say. Like, my grandma would knock on people's doors and they would open them like, oh, they didn't do all that messed up stuff that I heard. Like, my friends would be like, you know what we do to witnesses when they knock on the door? And I'm like, no, what? And they're like, moon them, flash them, do all kinds of messed up stuff. And I'm like, you guys better not do that to my grandma. I'll beat you up, you know? So I started knocking with her and going to church with her. And when grandma went to Florida a few years later, when I was like 14, 15, after I got baptized, you know, I always knew God was with me because she prayed for me. And maybe other people prayed for me, and I felt like one prayer can change the whole world. I feel like one baby can change the whole world, and one girl, one man can change the whole world. I have that strong belief from her, because they were victims of their circumstance, and they still were till the day they died, but they sacrificed a lot. So I know my grandma was in that religion for a good reason. But to be a good mother and to be a good daughter and granddaughter and person, like, I had to leave and find my way to God, separate physical things, you know?
Okay, so we are coming up on that last question kind of era, and so to close out the show, I'm going to ask you one final question, because I think that we've learned a lot in terms of, you know, where you came from, what your childhood was like. You had all these brothers and sisters.
Maybe, you know? I was sacrificed to the wolves. Maybe I was.
Your father was the provider for the household.
Rock star provider. He was you know. And I mean, anger issues, he beat everybody up.
The thing I want to look at is with the other children, the other kids. What was that? Like, you said that you kind of helped raise them. So what were those roles and responsibilities? What kinds of things did you do to help raise these brothers and sisters?
So the good part about it was my mom didn't really have all those natural instincts. She could do like one kid at a time. So I had to back her up and learn from her, you know, what do they need? And I got that from her, watching like just the routine of things pretty much. My dad, he was so strong that we really did feel safe. Like, my dad never spanked me in my life, but he would beat anybody up. He didn't care as long as it was a big, big, big dude, you know? But, you know, we felt safe with him. Now that I'm older, I'm so glad I was there because I protected them.
So what did you do? Did you make dinner for them? Did you help clothe them? Did you take them to school?
Yeah, I dressed my little brothers like little dolls all the time, like little dolls. I put them in doll clothes. It was so bad. My little sister, when she was born after them, she was so scared of dolls because I would dress them all up and I'd feed them. I would teach them everything Grandma told me, but I just naturally, I think before I was even born, I was just meant to be a type of woman that won't exist unless you continue to be that type of woman. And it starts from the time you come out the womb and take your first breath. And, you know, empathy, compassion, sympathy, like feelings. I feel everything.
Well, there it is, ladies and
gentlemen. Yeah, those kids were good.
There it is with the story of Maegan Tietz. This is our first episode, and we've learned a lot. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I know that everybody's going to be excited because we want to learn about what were those, you know, next steps inside of your life, maybe the teen years or the older years. We're going to get to that inside of the next episode.
Yeah, the roots, but I think we block some of that out sometimes, right?
Yeah, but you know, whatever you can recall, we will get to it. So to all the people viewing at home, I want to thank you and remind you, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell. Maybe send up some smoke signals. Let us know inside the comments what you guys think about the show. Maegan, thank you for joining us today on the story of the first episode, and we look forward to learning more. Manny, as always, I know that you have to get back to the factory, but thank you for being here and helping to host. We will see everybody next week. Thanks again.
Never